My name is Maggie Carpenter. I live in New Paltz, New York. I went to John Jay High School, and I am a physician. I'm a family doctor who does a lot of women's health.
Many African women do not get screened for cervical cancer. Sometimes it's due to ignorance, and other times it's because they do not have access to a screening facility.
Go.go is a not-for-profit that sends volunteer physicians to parts of Haiti, Senegal, and Ethiopia to establish sustainable women's health programs.
Our mission is to help women's healthcare around the world and to send volunteer providers to go help with that. There was this need for cervical cancer screening, and that was something that I could go for short periods of time, train the doctors there to do something, and then be able to come home and see my family and live a regular life, but still have an impact of something that could keep going on. So Go.go is a not-for-profit, which means a not-for-profit basically just gives us special tax status, so that if people give us donations, they can then use that as a tax deduction on their taxes. So it's a way to encourage people to donate to worthy causes. So, and we're not trying to obviously make a profit, which is why we're not for profit. But it also, the main reason to do it is to get the tax advantages for people when they do donations. And we go to foreign countries that we could do something in the United States, although it's not really, what we're doing is not really needed here. But our mission is to help women's healthcare around the world and to send volunteer providers to go help with that. Well, so I was over in Ethiopia, and as I was getting a tour by an OBGYN, they told me, I said, we went by the pathology department. And I said, is that where you guys do all your pap smears? And the doctor looked at me and he kind of made a weird face and said, we don't do pap smears here. And I said, well, what do you do for cervical cancer? And he looked at me and said, nothing. And then, so that's when I started researching what was being done around the world, and that there was this alternative method to a pap smear, because pap smear is what was developed in the 40s in the United States, is a way of getting some cells from a woman's cervix, which, do you know where the cervix is? It's the lower part of the uterus.
Yeah.
Kind of where the uterus and the vagina meet. And you take cells from there and look at them under a microscope with certain stains, and you can see if they all look normal or not. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. So it's not a very good test when you're in a country that doesn't even have enough regular doctors, let alone pathology doctors who can actually look at it. So they realized that if they used vinegar and you look at the cervix, you could actually see areas that were abnormal, and then you could treat them at the same time. Because the other thing is, not everybody you're seeing has a phone or even an address.
Yeah.
Most of the world doesn't have a mailbox that they can just go and get a letter saying, you have to come back in next week and get another test. So you want to be able to see them and treat them at the same time. It does. So because you've taken biology, so you know how cells have a nucleus. The larger the nucleus, cancer cells have very large nuclei, and so they have a lot of protein to glycogen, and because of that, the cells are damaged very easily by the vinegar. And so when they're damaged, they sort of soak it up and they become white. Whereas a normal cell doesn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't do. I was not on the. I knew that because when in the U.S., if you have an abnormal pap smear, we do what's called a colposcopy, and we use vinegar. So I knew that vinegar was used, but in order to do it as just a basic screening test was something I read about when I was researching other ways of screening for cervical cancer. And the great thing is that vinegar is available anywhere in the world and is incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
There's lots of groups that need help, but certainly women tend to be on the bottom of most people's efforts. Or I find that there are a lot of organizations that are out there that are helping pregnant women and helping babies, but not necessarily helping for cervical cancer. And because it's in certain countries in Africa, it's actually the leading cause of cancer death in women. It's like not all. There are a few where there's some other cancers that are kill more often, but it's very common. And also, you're at higher risk if you're HIV positive. And since there's a lot of HIV in these developing countries as well, they've got like two things going for them, going against them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel
Which is mainly because people get the treatments for HIV, so that you don't see AIDS as much.
Yeah.
Before the antiretrovirals, they were definitely dying faster from AIDS than cervical cancer, but yeah. Good question. So making it successful, it takes a lot of work. I'm trying to actually cut back on my regular stuff so that I have more time to try and get grants and foundation money. So it takes money and time to be successful, and good communication. Really making sure that whoever I'm talking to when we go over for training, that they're prepared for what we're going to do, that they have everything lined up, that they have women lined up for us to see, that they have, when I talk to them, I have to do you have electricity? Because if you don't have electricity, I'm not going to bring a LEAP machine, which uses electricity. Now, if you don't have electricity, that's fine, because we usually bring headlamps. So for doing the screening, we don't need electricity. And then if you use the freezing machine to treat it, then you don't need electricity either, because that's just a big thing of CO2. And believe it or not, soda and beer are so prevalent around the world that you can always find carbon dioxide. So tanks. So that works pretty well. So I think just, and I've been learning as I go. We're different than Doctors Without Borders, mainly in that Doctors Without Borders tends to go to sort of slightly more, what's the right word? Risky places, places that are suffering from some sort of political or natural disaster. And we sort of go to sort of more safe, more stable countries that just aren't doing this sort of work. Yeah. And the length of our trips, that we go for a week as opposed to going for, they have like permanent clinics in places. So, and they usually have a specific mission in each one. Like they might be helping refugees, or they might be doing, improving water and trying to get rid of a certain intestinal parasite in an area. So.
What are significant obstacles or steps that you've had to overcome?
Language is a really hard one. When we were in Ethiopia, I do not speak Amharic, which is the native language. Fortunately, their medical school training is in English, so I can talk to most of the doctors, but I can't really talk to the patients. In Senegal, the doctors all are trained in French, but again, the patients speak a multitude of different tribal languages, which I don't speak. So language is probably number one. I mean, money, obviously. And then also just cultural differences. Most places we go, hopefully you and most of your classmates haven't had pelvic exams, but it's a sensitive area that a woman's getting examined, and you want to go slowly and be sort of sensitive. And that's a very Western cultural attitude, so you can't really go and just say like, oh no, you're doing it wrong, or this is too dirty, or you have to respect their space and how they do things. And sometimes if you're used to how we do things, it can be sort of hard. So I always have to make sure that cultural sensitivity is something I talk to people about beforehand. Yes. I mean, we were doing a exam and treating this woman, and their doctor was sitting, it was in his office that we were doing it. He was sitting there and he was like eating his lunch loudly while we're doing this, which to us is like, are you kidding me? That's really rude. But it's not that unusual there. So you kind of, different organizations have different methods. And my feeling is that I try and lead by example. So like when I'm doing something, I'm doing a treatment on a woman, I'll talk to them a lot and, ask if they're okay and hold their hand and try and explain to them what's going on. But I can't really expect that they're going to all of a sudden change how they do things.
Yeah.
That's hard. It depends. In Ethiopia, I've got good people who get back to me and tell me like how many screenings they're doing and how many women they've treated. I just heard from the doctor we went to in Senegal that he's screened 40 or 50 people and done treatment on four, which isn't that many. And the other organization in Senegal, I have not been able to get any numbers at all. In Haiti, they have, since starting in July, they've screened 500 women. So it takes a lot of bugging people to get that info. And usually I try and explain it to them because they're like, why do I need to tell you what's going on? And I tell them because I need to know in order to try and raise money. Because if I don't have any statistics and can't show that what we're doing is making an impact, I'm not going to be able to ask people for money.
Yeah.
So. Well, we actually need to spread the awareness even in the United States. I don't know if you saw, there was an article in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago about the incidence of cervical cancers rising in the United States, and it's among minorities. And really, anybody can go for a screening. I mean, Planned Parenthood is not going to turn somebody, or a federally qualified healthcare center is not going to turn anyone away because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So it's mainly that women are just not going for them. To start with. So the more, I think we should have more awareness campaigns about it. But since it's the women's body, people get a little uncomfortable with that. Especially current administration.
Yeah.
Affect our organization because we don't talk about abortion or refer for abortion. Not that we're getting any federal funds anyway, but if we were. But it will affect a lot of organizations that are even just doing, women's health, but not even necessarily doing abortions. If they at all talk about it, they won't be able to get any money at all.
That's